When I was younger, around 14 or 15 years old, my family used to camp at a state park. Every night, my friend and I would walk through the woods. We called this the ritual. This particular night, we decided to walk further into the woods than usual. We had flashlights because we liked to try and navigate through the woods with them turned off. We were about half a mile from the nearest campsite when we heard soft whispering behind us. Obviously, we hit the flashlights and spun around, but we didn't see anything, so we kept walking and we start to hear it again. This time, we stop and look around a bit more before we decided to head back to our campsite. Then we see what's whispering. It's a lady crawling on the ground, whispering just random words. She was wearing dark clothes and was covered from head to toe in dirt. When she sees that we notice her, she stands up and declares that she was simply looking for her campsite. Bullshit. Anyways, we ended up walking her back to the campsite and tried helping her find her own group. Turns out that she was just really drunk or really high and got lost trying to find the bathroom. Her friends didn't even notice that she was missing, and if we didn't go that far into the woods, she would have been there all night, lost. It's pretty creepy. I went camping in Guinea Springs, Florida about 10 years ago, and sometime at night I heard the sound you hear out of movies or TV of a huge tree falling. Didn't think anything about it. About 10 minutes later, I started hearing lots of people talking outside of my tent, so I got out and discovered that the tree had fell on someone's tent kind of close by and killed them. A helicopter had to come and airlift them out. Safari guide here. Not really a camping story, but one time when I was out on a safari, I woke up one morning with something very warm, rather soft and comfy against my back. I realized that my back was against the canvas of the tent, and also realized that it must have been an animal. It was a really cold winter night. Temperatures dropped close to zero around here in the low field. What the hell? As I moved a bit, I heard the voice from my buddy from his tent, and he spoke a bit hushed, and with a definite tremble in his voice. The Africa bug, are you awake? Stupid me replied with a strong voice, yes. The animal next to me got up and luckily ran away. It ended up being a massive African male lion. I was camping in a valley by myself with no cell service. I stayed late on the trail, but I ended up running into a very nice local dude as it was getting dark. He showed me a local camping spot close to the road and to the river, but relatively camouflaged. I had a fire, drank beer, and listened to my friend's comedy podcast. I was loud and visible. Being it was dark already, I decided to sleep in the back of my truck, under the topper, next to all my gear, as opposed to setting up my tent. The next morning, I made a fire, cracked a beer, and started making breakfast. Then I noticed that there is a man at the edge of my camp. He comes closer, but never looks directly at me. This dude looks homeless, has a long ratty beard, and has at least 100 plastic grocery bags tied all over his clothes. I comment about how nice it is today. No response from him. I offer him breakfast, but still nothing. He sort of paces around the perimeter of my camp. I offer him a beer, but he just turns around. The dude is just standing there, back to me, wandering around. I ended up realizing that there wasn't going to be any good outcome from this. I had my bear spray and my buck knife super close by. I gave him a good ultimatum. Motherfucker, you are either going to acknowledge me or leave immediately. He ignores me. I grab the bear mace and walk over a few steps towards him. He sulked away and I threw my shit in my truck and left that place right quick. I wonder if he had watched me during the night, and I thank my laziness for staying in my truck instead of my tent. This is my parents' story, not mine. They were on a canoe trip way up in nowhere, Saskatchewan, far from any semblance of civilization. One morning, they hear rustling outside of their tent. Still half asleep, my dad sits up and tries to figure out what the hell's going on. The noise is loud and very close. Before he was able to collect himself enough to go out and investigate, his whole side of the tent collapses in on top of him. The weight lifted quickly. Now entirely awake, my parents scrambled to open the tent flap and figure out what was going on. About 10 feet away was a spooked black bear, staring confused and concerned at the tent. After being yelled at for a bit, it ran off. We figured that it had been foraging in the bushes right behind the tent and lost its balance. So my dad can truthfully say he has been sat on by a bear. We like to hike about 3 to 5 miles down a trailhead in deep Georgia. One night, the temperature dropped into the low 20s, which is really rare for mid-fall. We got a solid fire going, and the heat mixed with a full belly put us all to sleep very quickly. I woke up to my buddy tapping my foot with a stick. I looked up at him, and he nodded towards the fire. There were 2 wild boars kicking up dirt around the dying fire. We didn't have any sort of weaponry except a hand axe and was out of my reach. My friend and I laid there completely silent, watching these 2 for about an hour till the fire died completely down and they moved on. If you don't know, wild boars in Georgia are easily 150 pounds, pissed off all of the time, and prone to gore literally anything. We were really lucky we didn't spook them. My family went camping every summer when I was growing up. We usually bounced between Virginia Beach, Osuntigue, and the god-awful place called Westmoreland. One trip, we were in Osuntigue, near the beach, and we had 2 tents set up in different parts of the site. Sometime in the middle of the night, my mom woke up, which woke me up. She was sitting up straight but completely still, and I looked over at what she was staring at. In the moonlight, there was a silhouette of what looked like an old woman looking into our tent. Long, wiry hair and everything. I was young, so it terrified me, and I started asking my mom frantically what that was and who was outside. Once I made noise, it spooked the old woman, and she took off, and that's when we realized she was actually one of the feral ponies that live on the island. We had set up that particular tent on one of their trails, and they were going down to the beach. The scariest experience I've ever had while camping was with my wife when a windstorm blew in. I am talking trees being blown over, branches falling, the works, in a forest full of jack pine. Regardless, the creepiest experience I've ever had was when I was camping with my best friend. We were in a semi-remote camping area, drivable usually to get to it, but definitely only with a 4x4. It was a semi-maintained camping area, as in there were a couple of used fire pits, a few rotten picnic tables, and a rundown outhouse. Parks and Recreation only checked this place about once a year. So we get there and start setting up camp when my buddy wanders over to the shitter and opens the door. He stands there for a second or two, and then closes the door and goes to the second one, goes in, and comes out a few minutes later. He comes back to me and says to go check out the first one. I assume someone shit on the floor or an animal got stuck in there and died or something. Nope. 3 full backpacks, and I'm talking big bags, like the bag I have, the size I use for week-long trips. We open them up. 2 are full of good quality gear, nothing usual, but the third is full of Skittles, like bulk bags, small bags, regular, tropical, sour, every flavor and size of bag you can possibly imagine, just full of Skittles. We camped for about 4 days, never saw a soul. Bags were still there when we left. Who left all that gear? Why did one person pack 30 liters of Skittles? Don't know, but it was nevertheless pretty weird. Oh, another scary one. Dog and I were backpacking, spur of the moment overnight trip. Wasn't far off the road or anything. So I just have a tarp up as a small shelter. Small little fire. Wasn't really hiding per se, but wasn't being obvious either. Just dozing off when I hear a truck rip up in a bunch of drunken voices. Then the shooting started. Now, they probably didn't know I was out there. I was parked on a different road and hadn't really realized I had walked as close as I had to the second road. But I still don't like being in an area where a bunch of drunken yahoos are shooting off guns, especially when I was fairly certain they were shooting in my direction, based on the lay of the land. So I put my puppy on a tight leash and headed out ASAP. This happened about 25 years ago or so. I saw eyes in the darkness of the trees when shining my flashlight up. Seemed kinda high. They were reflecting red. Also was having sticks and rocks occasionally thrown to our camp. Nothing big, and it was directed at the fire. Eventually it stopped and we went to bed. There were 4 of us. I'm a light sleeper, and so is my dad. We both wake up to footsteps and a really bad stink around 5 a.m. My dad shook the side of the tent and yelled, "Get the fuck out of here!" Whatever it was ran off. Cowlitz Country, Washington. I went on a camping trip in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, only to wake and hear something sniffing the outside of our tent. My immediate reaction was that it was likely a bear or some other animal that came across our site, or just maybe my dumbass friends didn't tie up the garbage enough. Seconds later, I can hear the sniffing go to the tent next to ours, and everyone in mine grabs one another quietly to acknowledge we are all awake and were aware of what was happening outside. Moments later, a friend in another tent popped out and started to scream and make noise. He had a gun too, hoping it would scare off whatever animal was in our sight. Turns out it wasn't an animal. It was some guy who had gone through our coolers for food and also decided it'd be okay to sniff our tents. Our friend chased him off and we immediately packed our shit and left. Edit. Alright, since this is floating at the top, I thought I might share another creepy camping story. A year after the above incident, my dumbass friends and I went back to the nearby area, thinking that what we had encountered was a one-time incident. This time, we thought we'd outsmart any possible creepers, and instead of camping in our tents, we all slept in the bed of our trucks and SUVs. 'Cause they can't possibly sniff a Toyota Tacoma. Anyways, it's the middle of the night. I'm passed out in the back of my SUV when I suddenly feel a bright light on my face. Naturally, I would have woken up, cussed and asked whoever was doing that to knock it off. However, I instantly knew to pretend to be asleep and not let the individual know I was awake. I laid there next to my girlfriend, hoping she would do the same, as I kept an ear out for any unusual sounds like sniffing. All I could hear was a friend snoring by the campfire. After the light left my car, I heard the person walk to the next truck and shine his light on my friends in there. I slowly looked up, and it ended up being some older guy, just standing there staring at everyone while they slept. I waited until he left the campsite, and I busted my ass out of the truck and woke up my friends, most of which had also been pretending to sleep and realized what was going on. Don't camp outside of Tucson, Arizona, unless you want a hills have eyes creature sniffing and staring at you while you sleep. I live in a rural town surrounded by mountains and forests, so camping is almost a weekly event, even in the winter. The one I can't shake is when me and my friend broke off from our group of another 16 to 19-year-olds to camp by a better fishing spot about a mile away. We only brought one tent for the group, so we built a lean-in against a large boulder in the clearing. I couldn't sleep because I had the feeling someone was watching us. I assumed it was a mountain lion, which isn't that big of a deal considering their behavior, so I threw some more logs on the fire. I looked up from the fire, and under the light of the full moon, there was a man standing at the edge of the clearing, about 80 yards away. I was frozen and couldn't take my eyes off of him while he assumably stared back. He walked off in the opposite direction after about a minute or two. I doubt he had any ill intentions, but I sat there clutching my friend's .357 the entire night. Edit. I didn't wave or call out because I was terrified. I was frozen since I was 16 and inexperienced. Nowadays, I would call out and see what's going on. Also, mountain lions aren't a concern. I've been stalked by them and have stumbled face to face with a few. They aren't a big issue or really scary if you have a good understanding of them. Hey guys, it's Gote here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to the Scary Story episode. If you have any stories of your own, please do not hesitate to send me an email through my personal email linked in the description below, and I will surely put that in one of the episodes somewhere. So, yeah, definitely do that. And also check out Facebook and Instagram to more closely converse with me. But other from that, have a good quarantine day. Thank you so much, and I'll see you mates in the next episode.